Hello, everyone. Today we are meeting with Larry Calkins, the Calkins Family Association, and he is going to tell us the story of his family and barbed wire. Take it away, Larry.
Okay, well, thank you, Nanette. Uh, as my presentation is on the Kelly Barbed Wire Company, and it's about four Calkins brothers that my great grandfather was involved with. So, with that, we'll go to my genealogy, and let's see if I can move that up there a little bit. There we go. Um, So I'm off on the left. There's me, and my father is Lauren Gary Calkins Jr., and he's reading a birthday card or something, and he's chuckling at some of the comments in there. His father is Lauren Gary Calkins Sr., and he's a character in his own right, but he was raised in Evanston, Illinois, with his father, Gary Giles Calkins, and his mother, Ida Mae Loring. And that's where he got his first name from, was his mother. But Loring Gary Calkins Sr. Just to digress a minute, he was a artist, and he did some artwork, and some of the artwork is behind me, if you can see up here. Uh, he went to the prestigious Chicago Art Institute, and he knew that he couldn't make a whole lot of money doing artwork, so he went on to Yale and went to the Yale engineering school and became a mechanical engineer. So after that, he moved to Massachusetts, started selling pig iron instead of doing any of his educational pursuits. And then a little while after that, he met my grandmother. They got married, and he was they got married, and then he decided to go on into the stock market. In the 1920s, the stock market was pretty good, and so he made quite a bit of money off of that until the stock market crashed in 1929. And he lost all of his money, and my grandmother's mother, Emma Tabor Bourne, said, "Catherine, that man has lost all of his money. You need to divorce him." So she did, and he was devastated and became quite depressed. But it was near the start of World War II, and so he decided to move out to California and use his mechanical engineering degree and build airplanes. So when he did that, Dad graduated from high school in the early 40s, and he moved out with his father, and they had a great time. And my grandmother was so jealous that she said, "I've got to go on out there and be with him and have a good time." So that's what she did. And they got remarried out there in California. But this isn't a story about my grandfather or my grandmother. This is really a story about Gary Giles Calkins, who is his father, and we want to talk more about him. So this is a story of barbed wire, and Gary Giles Calkins wrote this story. It was an essay that he called The Story of Barbed Wire, and I called it the Kelly Barbed Wire Company, or alternatively, the Thornwire Hedge Company. And he wrote this in 1915, a year before he passed. So let's talk about where Gary Giles came from. And Gary was a son of Almond and Susan Almy, Almond Calkins and Susan Almy. And he had three brothers that were older than he was: William Calkins, John Wesley, Almond H., and then himself, Gary Giles Calkins. And Gary was born in 1846, and he had some quite older brothers. But that wasn't all the family members. Some of the family members were the two oldest girls were Susanna and Emily, and then William came along, Mary and then John Wesley came along, and then Juliet, and then Almond and Gary came along. And then Olivia and Armadette were the runners-up in the family. And so 10 kids in all, and somewhere along the line, Almond and Senior and Susan got tired of each other or something, and they divorced. And so Almond married Harriet Bowker, and they had a last child for Almond with Seward. They also had a friend and business partner who we want to talk about in a little bit, A.K. Stiles, and we'll get to him in a moment. But let's talk first about a brief history of the barbed wire activity that took place in the 1800s. In 1831, Ichabod Washburn from Massachusetts had a drawn wire industry, and he made wire not only for fences, but he made wire for other items too. And so it was a pretty going concern. In 1864, he had that operation for a while, and in 1864, the Homestead Act came along. And of course, there was a huge migration to the West. Well, that intrigued a lot of people, free property and that kind of thing. And so they were concerned about fencing their property, at least some of the migrants were. In 1865, Louis John in France put together a patent for the first barbed wire. And I'm not sure too much about what that was, but not too far along afterwards, since 1867 and 1868, William Hunt and Michael Kelly established their patents. William Hunt's patent was a spool and wire type of a barbed wire situation, and then Michael Kelly had this more of what we think of as barbed wire now, which was a couple of strands of drawn wire with barbs on it. We'll talk about a little bit about his invention in a moment. But in 1873, Henry Rose, he put together the first wooden fence strip with barbs on it. And he went to the state fair and showed his product at the state fair, and people were very interested in it at that time. One of those people that was very interested in what he produced was Joseph Glidden, who also was from Illinois. He is from DeKalb. And in 1874, he decided he was going to patent his invention. And that Joseph Glidden is considered somewhat the father of barbed wire, because he was the first one to actually manufacture and sell it in the country. So Gary Giles was about 24 years old, so he's a rather young man at that time. But at the same time, A.K. Stiles, a business partner to William and to John and to Almond, decided to visit DeKalb and see what he could find out about Joseph Glidden's operation. Well, Joseph and Glidden evidently had a partner, Isaac Elwood, and Isaac was more of a hardware guy and Joseph was a farmer, and together they manufactured their version of barbed wire. The two sold their product to the farmers in the area, and it became a pretty growing concern. At first, the farmers were kind of afraid of all this new invention, this barbed wire, and were afraid the cows would get injured or the other animals would get injured. Elwood agreed to pay for any animal injured. So that kind of solved that concern of the local farmers. Glidden was informed about the other two patents at the time that he got his patent, and he was told about both the Hunt and the Kelly patents, and so he needed to be aware He could only patent the barb. So the Kelly patent, to talk a little bit about that for a moment, and I put the names of the various people who were in the Calkins family and the Calkins industry who worked on this Calkins patent down in the right-hand corner, William, John, and Almond, so you can keep track of who all these people are. So, but the Kelly patent was based on a two-wire system, or it looks like in the picture, it's a three-wire. But they threaded the metal barb onto one of the wires with a pierced through the center. And it was a triangular cut out of sheet metal. And as we talked, the Glidden could only patent his barbed wire for the shape of the barb. So he has a little different one. He just had a wire with sharpened ends on the end as his barb. But William Calkins decided he would go to New York and find Michael Kelly and talk to him and see if he couldn't obtain the Kelly patent, because he knew it wasn't being in use. Well, as you can imagine, he went to New York City, and there were a lot of Michael Kellys in the phone directory, and he went through everyone until he found the correct Michael Kelly. Well, they had a great discussion together, and Kelly's idea came to him in Ireland when he was a boy. Excuse me. And he in Ireland, they had hedges, and the hedges were just bushes that grew that kept the cows in a particular location. And he decided that sometimes those hedges would get broken or busted through by the animals, or alternatively, the weather would tear a hole in one of the hedges, and he wanted to be able to mend those hedges. So he decided to get some tin and put it on a wire and string it out and see if it works. So and he kept this idea in his head all the way until he moved to New York. And in New York, he lived in a small tenement, and he had some annoying cats out on his deck. And the cats would just whine and howl and cry all night long, and it kept him awake, and he was really upset about that. So he decided to put his invention to work. And so he put some barbs on a wire and put it out on his deck and stretched it out, and lo and behold, the idea worked. It kept those cats off that deck. The cat's fur caught on the barb, and they never came back. And so his idea worked, and he decided that he wanted to do something about it. So he talked to his lawyer, and his lawyer suggested that he patent it. So that's how the Kelly patent came about. Well, William Calkins was enamored by the story, obviously, and he decided that he wanted to purchase this patent from him if Kelly was interested in selling it. And Kelly didn't really have much of a hesitation, because he wasn't doing anything with the patent anyway, and he figured he might get some good use out of it, and as long as William kept the Kelly name on the patent. And so he said, okay, and so he gave him $5,000, which was a lot of money back then, for the patent. And that's how the Calkins brothers got a hold of the patent. Well, they were planning to go back to Chicago and just talk to Glidden and see if the Calkins brothers couldn't sell the patent to Glidden for a handsome profit. Well, when he got to DeKalb, he saw a very successful manufacturing operation, and he realized that that was not going to work very well. And so he decided not to offer the patent to Glidden's. So he went back to Chicago and talked to his brothers, and his brothers said, yeah, let's go ahead and start a manufacturing operation ourselves. So they found a mechanic named Peacock, and Peacock was able to build a machine to stamp out the barbs and out of the sheet metal and to pierce it with a hole so it would thread onto the wire. And he did that, and then he was able to wrap that second wire around that barb and make it a pretty good barbed wire system. And the reason why it also allowed for the two wire system allowed for expansion and contraction in the cold and the heat in the summertime. So that was a very effective type of wire. And so the Kelly Barbed Wire Company began. Well, a few years later, they decided that they wanted to change the name a little bit. And so they called it the Thorn Wire Hedge Company, the sole manufacturer of Kelly Barbed Wire. And so that's how in 1800, the Thorn Wire Hedge Company came into effect. John Wesley Calkins became the CEO of the Thorn Wire Hedge Company. And Allman had a important aspect to that too. And Gary was assigned the Eastern Agency for the sales of the barbed wire. So they were thriving along and doing pretty well. And then Washburn Moen remember Ichabod Washburn? Well, he's still around and they're still manufacturing wire. And he wanted to get in the barbed wire business. So Washburn made an offer to Glidden. He went to Glidden in 1876, and Glidden decided to sell his patent to the Washburn Moen Company. He sold the patent, but he kept the rights to manufacture his product, and he was paid by Washburn 25 cents per 100 pounds of wire for that sale, and for the sale of the patent. And Glidden was happy with that. But then Washburn and his attorneys made their way over to the Kelly Barbed Wire Company, and they agreed to sell their patent as well, both patents actually. I think they had the Hunt and the Kelly patent both, and they agreed to sell both the patents to Washburn and to consolidate their business a little bit. And they were paid 37.5 cents per 100 pounds of wire for their product. And the Thorn Wire Hedge Company kept the manufacturing rights, at least for the 9-year period. While they were operating, the Washburn Company realized that they had some infringements on those patents. And so there were about 30 other companies at the time manufacturing barbed wire. And so they used those patents and the leverage to go after some of those patents and negotiate with those other barbed wire manufacturers. And so they did, and with the help of the Calkins brothers, they did. The unfortunate thing about Washburn is that they decided that they were concerned that the Thorn Wire Hedge Company was making too much money or something. And so they had a timing issue of the payments. They had the amount of it as an issue, and they had the amount of products sold as an issue. So they took Thorn Wire Hedge Company to court and made it very difficult for the Thorn Wire Hedge Company. But and the Thorn Wire Hedge Company lost some of those it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So they lost some of those in the court agreed with Washburn. So it was a disappointing thing for the Calkins brothers, but they still made quite a bit of money, $700,000 or something like that in the 9-year period that they were operating. After the infringement suits were settled, an association was formed. And A.K. Styles, remember A.K.? He became the chair of that association. Well, Washburn-Moen eventually became part of the U.S. Steel Corporation and called the American Steel and Wire Company of New Jersey. And the Washburn plant became their central works. First, well, the barbed wire industry changed the world. And the cowboys hated the fence initially because they were used to open range and they wanted to get their cows moving along the open plains and graze wherever they wanted to. But the fences caused a problem. They couldn't do that as effectively as they once did. Farmers, however, they wanted their crops protected from these cows, and so they fenced their properties, and they were effective at keeping the animals out. The railroads also wanted to fence their right away. It became cheaper. If you recall, some of those old locomotives had big cow catchers on the front of their trains, and so that worked when they didn't have fences controlling the animals. But when the fences went up, they didn't have to use the cow catchers quite as often. So American Indians also were affected, the indigenous people of Americas. When their buffalo herds weren't decimated by the rifles of non-Indians shooting the buffaloes, they were altered. Their routes were altered by fences in the area, and same with the deer and the elk. Those animals could not roam like they once did, and the Native Americans' life was altered. In the short 9-year period that the barbed wire industry got its feet underneath them, barbed wire took the nation by storm. And the American Steel and Wire Company began their consolidation of the industry. The Calkins went on to other industries, other businesses, but they were a vital part of that development of that industry. So I have a book, The Story of Barbed Wire, which is told by Gary Giles Calkins that I've published. And I think I'm going to give that to a bunch of these to the Calkins World organization so they can sell those if they want to. The other thing is, if you'd like an electronic copy of his story, I'm happy to send it to you. You can write me at larrycalkins@24@gmail.com and to get a copy of that. Or you can go on the Calkins World website where a lot of this information and other things are available for you to review and look at. So I hope you enjoyed this. And a footnote, a couple of years ago, I received a knock on my door, and a sheriff answered the door and handed me some papers. And evidently, Gary Giles Calkins purchased some property in Texas, and it was right along a defunct railroad. And I can just imagine why he wanted that property, because he was in the business not only of selling barbed wire, but he was also in the business of selling oil burners too later on in life. And so I can see that where he might have wanted a piece of property right along the railroad so that he could ship product down to Texas and unload it at that site in his foot of the railroad, and then have somebody sell it in Texas. He still owned that property. Taxes were not paid on it. And so the county wanted their money back. And I understand that. But my brother-in-law went on down there and he told me the other day that, the property was not really worthless. Besides, it was rather worthless. But besides, it was a small piece of property. You couldn't build a house on it. There are utility issues, and that they wanted to build a road right across there, and one of the on-ramps would have cut right across the corner of that property. So we decided that it was probably not the best thing to pursue that. But anyway, that's just a sidelight that I thought was interesting that affected me recently. So again, I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we will see you on our next video. Thanks.